Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 8:30 p.m. Welcome. My name's Ron. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Alcoholics Anonymous Eagles Super Bowl pregame show. Yeah, and we have a green chairperson tonight, one of the best in all of Pennsylvania. Please welcome Nick to come up here and have some fun.
Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Nick and I'm an alcoholic. We're going to go ahead and, this is a 1-hour speaker meeting, meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Food and fellowship starts at 8 o'clock and our speaker goes on at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday evening at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. Please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Or is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Yes, sir.
My name is Dave, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Dave, welcome.
I'm Sean, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Sean, welcome.
Dave, an alcoholic.
Hey, Dan, welcome.
Alex, alcoholic.
Hey, Alex, welcome. All right, welcome to everybody. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hand. Are there any announcements from the floor for the good of AA? Right? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD Donations, and all CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and our Facebook group. Subscribe and share. You can find our speakers there, join our Facebook page to keep informed, and share upcoming events and meetings. And now with that, we have Brian to come up and read the Just for Today prayer.
Good evening, everybody. Grateful to be here tonight, grateful to be sober. My name is Brian and I am an alcoholic. This is a reading just for today, a prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can. Dress becomingly, talk low. Act courteously, criticize not one bit. Not find fault with anything and not try to improve or regulate anybody except myself. With that, I'm going to have Jack come up here. Jack's going to read the AA preamble. Thank you.
I'm Jack. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Jack.
This is the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help others, alcoholics, achieve sobriety. And I've asked Andrew to come up and read the 12 steps.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew, and I'm an alcoholic. And these are the 12 steps of recovery. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
The 7th tradition. Every A group ought to be fully self-supported, declining outside contributions. At this time, we like to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees. We do have expenses, and this group provides many services. Your donations cover food, rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. And just a little side note, over the past year, this group has donated over 200 big books to recovery centers all around the area, so thank you for your contributions. There is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and try to limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, to introduce our speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, we have John M. from Maryland from the Haven at Last group.
Good evening, my name is John. I'm an alcoholic. Hey, John. Been sober since May 16th, 2005. I have a sponsor, and I do have a home group. It is called Haven at Last. We meet in Bethesda, Maryland, which is a little ways from here, on Thursday nights at 7:30 p.m. If you're in the DC area and you're looking for a great group, it's a good group filled with a lot of energy, similar to this group. And you know, on the way up here, I was talking with Angelica, and she was kind of saying, she's not in the program. She was like, what is this going to be like? You know, what can you expect? And I was like, I have no idea. You know, and whenever you get asked to do this kind of thing, you never really know what you're walking into. I said it could be 5 people around a fire. You know, it could be 50 people. You know, it could be, you never know what you're going to walk into. You never know the atmosphere it's going to be. I said sometimes you walk into groups and there's a somber kind of sad attitude, you know, like we're alcoholics, you know, and then you walk into places like this where it's like welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I felt it when I came in here. This group reminds me of my home group. It's got a positive energy. It's got that feeling of a solution. It's got people who seem like they're happy to be here, like they have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, which I relate to. That has been my experience, and so it's nice to walk into a group like this. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for having me out. I'm going to do my best to share my story with you all on this Super Bowl Eve. I did want to start out by confessing something, being honest about something, that I'm a Commanders fan. And, you know, sorry. That's I don't know. I'm say sorry to you guys. You guys can feel sorry for me. But on the way up here, we were you know, all up the highways. There was signs, you know, and you guys have taken you're like, forget about safety. Fly, Eagles, fly. You know, like we don't need safety on the roads. There's a crash up ahead. Screw that. Fly, Eagles. You know, and it was good to see that. And I was saying again, I was like, I think we're in Eagles country out here. So I wish you guys the best tomorrow, and I'm excited for the game. And hey, we kept it in the NFC East, so I can't complain there. So I was not happy when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're new tonight, welcome. If you're not happy, if this seems really weird, you walk into an AA meeting in a church on a Saturday night, there's a bunch of guys dressed up in suits. You're like, what is going on here? One of them looks like your lawyer, one of them looks like the judge, you know, and you're like, who are these guys? Can I even be honest about where I'm really at? Are they police? You know, I used to have a buddy I would take into treatment centers with me, and he looked like a cop. He just looked like a cop. Some of these guys look like cops, you know. And then we would go in, and the second we would go in, the guys in the treatment center would just be like, cop, you know. And I'd be like, it's fine, he's not a cop, you know. I was not happy. I was not happy to be an alcoholic. I was not happy to be in AA. The circumstances of my life were not good. I was not going anywhere. I was sleeping on my grandfather's living room floor. I was about to go back to jail for violating probation. I had a dead-end blue-collar job where I wasn't making any money and no chance of growth because I had lost my license. Things were not looking good. And, now my life is completely different. So I stand up here and I'm happy and I'm grateful to be here, but I also remember the way I felt when I came in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're not feeling that great, just know it's totally fine. It's all good. We're glad you're here. And I'm going to do my best to share with you what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And I grew up, I've been thinking about this a lot recently too. I grew up about a mile from where I live now. And that's, I don't know if that's good or bad. Just say I haven't gone very far, And I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I had two parents, and I come from a long line of alcoholism. I'm an Irish Catholic family. Long line of alcoholism, mental illness, drug dependency. You name it, we had it in my family, right? Some of my earliest memories growing up are Christmas parties at my uncle and aunt's house where, all my relatives they start off the day and they're kind of quiet and maybe a little angry, but as the night goes on, their cheeks get red, their eyes get glassy, and they start laughing real loud, and they start making fun of each other, and it became this big party. My uncle is having a grand mal seizure on the floor because he decided to quit drinking 2 days before Christmas, and my dad's driving us home on the left side of the double yellow lines, and I'm thinking as a kid, like, this can't be right, this doesn't feel right, and I'm telling him, Dad, you're driving on the wrong side, and you shut up, and I'm in the back seat, and these are my earliest memories. And my mom, she has panic attacks, we're taking her to the hospital, she's on a bunch of medicine, I say all that to say that if you were a betting person, probably a few of them in here, and if you were a betting person, you wouldn't have bet on John making it, becoming probably too much in life. You would have said he's going to have some trouble, and you would have been right if you had bet that. Early on, I went to school, I got decent grades, I played sports, I had a lot of friends, and although my family had those problems, my mom and my dad did the best they could for me. That we didn't have everything, but we had enough, and I had some semblance of a normal life, I guess, outside of the alcoholic household, but somewhere along the line, something happened. And the way that I like to describe it is a little bit different from what I hear a lot in AA meetings. A lot of people say they felt uncomfortable. They felt like they didn't fit in their skin. They felt like they didn't get the memo on the first day of school of how to act. For me, it wasn't even that so much as I just was very competitive. I remember always wanting to be the best. And that meant the best at sports, that meant the best in school, that meant the prettiest girl, that meant anything I did, I wanted to be the best at it. And here's the problem with that. There's a lot of pressure when you got to be the best. And there's a lot of anxiety revolving around having to look good and be the best. And what happened to me is that pressure mounted up to the point where one day I found myself with some buddies, and a lot of my friends had older brothers, and they smoked cigarettes and they smoked weed, and we got messed up for the first time, and it relieved something inside of me that I didn't even know needed to be relieved. And from that point, I kind of started to just, I don't think I took an immediate right turn, but I just immediately started to veer off that path of what, looked like a normal life for a teenager. I like to say this, I started out as the kind of kid that your parents would have let you hang out with. They would have let you sleep over my house, and if you told them you were going out with me, they would have had no problem with you doing it. But I ended up being that guy that you were definitely not mentioning me to your parents. And that started to happen at this point. And I started messing up in school. I started skipping class. I started doing those things that you definitely didn't want your parents seeing you do. And by the time I was 16 years old, I had, I guess I'll tell the story. So when I was 16, my childhood home burned down, and it was my fault. My brother and I, we were partying in the basement one night, and we left a candle lit, and that candle caught a drape on fire, and it burnt my mom's house down, and this was I think a pivotal moment for me in my life, because we had to move obviously. We moved away from where we lived, further away from my high school, and that resulted in me driving to school, and in the end resulted in me not getting to school. And I started to skip school regularly, and I became that guy that if you wanted to get messed up, you would wait outside of the school for me, and I'd pick you up in the morning, and we would just leave. And getting messed up became the center of my life. And I like to talk about the first time I got drunk, because I think it was an important night for me, and a few things happened, and I'll tell the story like this. My mom and dad had gotten divorced, and my mom, God bless her, she loved to date alcoholics. This was like her thing, and every guy she went out with was an alcoholic pretty much, and the guy she was dating at this time was an alcoholic. We called him Jesus, and we called him Jesus because he looked just like Jesus, except he drove a 1975 Chevy pickup truck, and Jesus was the kind of guy who would come home at night and the whole side of his truck would just be smashed in, and we'd be like, Jesus, what happened to your truck, man? And he'd be like, I don't know. And at the time, I didn't realize that Jesus was suffering from blackouts. Jesus, he didn't remember what he was doing, and I would soon learn about that. And he came home to the house one night and he had a couple of fifths of Absolute vodka. And I remember it like it was yesterday. We opened those fifths up and I started drinking. And I wish I could say I remember a lot about that night, but I don't. I do remember a few things though. I remember getting sick for the first time, laying on the bathroom floor, hugging the toilet with my head on the tile because it was cold, and just wondering how the room could spin an entire 360 without me even moving. It didn't make any sense. And I remember a second thing, and this is also an important thing. I said my first of many foxhole prayers, prayers to God, a God that when I came into AA, I would have claimed I didn't even really believe in. But I said a prayer, and it was probably the most innocent of those foxhole prayers that I would say throughout my drinking, because it was very simple. It was, God, if you please make this feeling go away, because I felt terrible. I had drank way too much. I felt real sick, and I hated being sick. And I said, if you make this feeling go away, I promise I'll never drink again. It's funny now to think about it, and it's like, I lied to God right then and there, my first time I got drunk, and of course the feeling went away, and I woke up the next day, and I'd say probably about 1 PM, I went out into the living room after getting up, and there was some of that liquor left from the night before, and I just started drinking it right then and there. And that was about I would say the level of my resolve at that point to follow what I had asked God for and promised, and just in life in general. I from that point on, my life revolved around partying. I wanted to get messed up every day. I wanted to meet people who got messed up like me. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about success. I look back on that time now, and I got a lot of friends with kids, and I meet a lot of younger folks in the program, and some of them are, thinking about colleges, or they're thinking about success. That stuff didn't even cross my mind. And I came into AA thinking I was a really smart guy too. I thought I had it all together, but I never thought of that stuff. I never thought about maybe trying to score well in the SATs so I could go to a good college. I didn't apply to college. What are you talking about? I'm here to party. And that was it, and so here I am, I'm drinking every day. I end up dropping out of high school. I am the exact opposite of what, like I said, your parents want you to be hanging out with and what you want to be. And I start getting in trouble with the law. I talked about Jesus blacking out. I quickly became a blackout drinker, and those blackouts would get increasingly more and more dangerous and more uncomfortable, I guess, for me. I remember in the beginning I'd black out and kind of realizing the next day that I don't remember part of the night, mainly through just hearing somebody who was with me the night before say, man, you were so crazy, you took your shirt off and you jumped on that car. And I was like, man, I don't remember jumping on that car last night, and it was things like that, and people would cheer me on and be like, you're wild, man, you're a lot of fun, and then it started to become these things like, do you remember what you said to me last night? Or do you remember how you treated her last night? Or I can't believe you did that last night. And this was like pre-cell phones, really, like everybody having iPhones and video. There was no texting. Like, I can't even imagine what y'all go through now, like the new people. I can't even imagine the videos your girlfriends or boyfriends must send you, this was you last night. Like none of that was going on for me. It was like, for me, maybe it was like a Nokia phone, and it might have been a text message I sent, like, ooh, that was not good, but nothing like there is today. And so I'm getting in trouble with the law, and I'm blacking out, and by this time I'm going to outpatient treatment centers where doctors and counselors are telling me I clearly have a problem and I should stop drinking. They're putting me on medications, things that are not helping with those blackouts. They're making them worse, actually. They're happening a lot quicker. I'm taking a couple of drinks and I'm, on a bunch of SSRIs and benzos and stuff like that, and I'm just instant blackouts, and I'm starting to do bad things, and I find myself going into my first inpatient treatment center, and this happens when I like to steal my parents' cars. I don't know if anybody else relates to stealing cars, but I love just taking the car, wait until everybody goes to sleep, and just, the keys started out on the key thing, then they were hidden in a drawer somewhere, and they were hidden under their pillow, and you're like thinking, how am I going to get in there, and so I'm stealing my parents' car. One night I steal my mom's car, and I wake up the next morning, and in great alcoholic fashion, the car's not there where I wake up, and any normal person might be like, well, I left the car over at Timmy's house, let me go back and get it. I don't remember last night. So I get up, and I'm, my mom needs to go to work. My little brother's in high school. He needs to get to school, and I'm like, and so I just walked home, and I walked to the house, and my mom, she was a nurse, and she was standing outside in her scrubs, and my brother's right there with his backpack, and she's like, where's my car? And I just walked by her, and I said, I don't freaking know, man, and walked in the house. And those are those kind of moments, start to build up. Those are the kind of things you start to do that you start to feel like, maybe I'm not doing so well here in life, treating the people who love me more than anything that way. And needless to say, I went to inpatient treatment shortly after that. I think that was a tipping point for them. And I found myself in treatment. I found myself in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not like this, but I found myself in meetings, and people were calling themselves alcoholics, and they were saying, John, are you an alcoholic? And I was like, I am not an alcoholic, And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't because I didn't think I had a drinking problem. It was because I knew that the second I admitted to being an alcoholic, that I was basically saying that I can't drink anymore safely. Because y'all were talking about that in these meetings. So I didn't want to say I was an alcoholic. But I knew I had a drinking problem. I just didn't want to stop yet. It hadn't gotten bad enough. So I went back out and found myself in a bunch more trouble. And what that trouble looked like was DWIs. 3 DWIs in 3 years. And the problem with me was I didn't just get DWIs. I would fight the arresting officers when they would try to handcuff me. And at the age of 18, I found myself running a stop sign and pulling into a 7-Eleven where there was some police officers hanging out. And they proceeded to tell me I had ran a stop sign, and they wanted to see my license. And I reached in my pocket, and they felt threatened by that and said, let me see your hands. And I didn't hear them because I was pretty much in a blackout almost. And they grabbed me, and I just started fighting them. And I hit one of them and was arrested and sent to jail. And I think that was the first time when I really thought maybe I needed some help. That was the first time, because I was looking at, they actually sentenced me to 3 years for the assault, but they suspended all 3 of them because it was my first conviction as an adult. And I was sentenced to treatment and sentenced to AA. And that was really when I found my home group that I had for the first 15 years of my sobriety. That was where I found an active group like this. And I realized for the first time maybe that if I did stop drinking, life didn't have to be over. It wasn't the end of the line. Because I always felt like, there's people who are out there drinking, and there's people who can't make it. And the people who can't make it, who quit, life is over for them. AA is not... I kind of get disappointed a lot of time in movies and TV shows when they show AA meetings, because they're so down and so like, my name's so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic. Like, that's just not been my experience. And I really felt like for the first time then that maybe life didn't have to be over, because I found an active group like this. But again, at that time, I was just not willing to surrender. I was not willing to go to any lengths. The things you were talking about here, the steps you were talking about taking, was not ready to do that. So I'd come around to AA, I'd hang out for a little while, I'd get a sponsor, maybe work a couple of the steps, but anytime we got close to this searching and fearless moral inventory, I was like, nah, not. You want me to write what down on paper? You know, I was like, I'm not doing that. And so I would proceed to leave again and drink again, and mostly over resentments and out of anger, and I would get a second DWI when I was 19. I'd get a third DWI when I was 20, and all through this time I'm going in and out of inpatient treatment centers. I am working these dead-end jobs with no real growth. I don't even have a high school diploma. I don't have a degree. I think I had attempted to go to community college one semester just to get my parents off my back. I stopped going after a couple weeks. And here I am, I'm 21 years old. My mother has moved out of the state, and I really believe it was because she couldn't deal with her son anymore, watching me kill myself. Because at this point I had become a daily drinker. I was buying $10 half gallons of vodka, cheap plastic bottles. I didn't care, anything to get me messed up. And I was working this labor job, and the good thing about that job was I could show up half in the bag. You know, I could show up hungover. I could show up if I had a couple beers in the morning to kind of get myself going. As long as I could speak well enough to not slur my words too much, they would let me stay at work. You know, and I would say once a week they would do the test, and they'd be like, "Nah, get out of here." You know, and those were my favorite days, right? My favorite, and I'm going to share this, and I hope this doesn't trigger anybody, but my favorite kind of drinking was multiple days of just drinking around the clock. You know, drinking where, and this isn't everybody's experience, and if you don't relate to this, that's fine. But my favorite kind of drinking was, I want to call it responsibility-free drinking, or at least in the moment, responsibility-free, right? And I would get drunk, and I could pass out and wake up and reach for the bottle. That was my favorite kind of drinking, you know, and drinking like that creates, I would say, depression and a desire to not live anymore. And what would happen to me is I'd work this job Monday through Friday. I'd work 50, 60 hours. I'd work a ton of overtime. Sometimes I'd work Saturdays. I'd find myself on Fridays with a check. We got paid weekly. But by this point in my life, I was not allowed to have a bank account anymore at any bank. And maybe some of you relate to this. You know, if you overdrafted enough banks, they put you on this list. You know, and this list somehow, you know, you think the banks are competing with each other, but they're friends, man. You know, and they share this list with each other, and this list has people like me on it, people who have overdrafted at every bank. And so when you go in with your paycheck to one of these new banks and you have a smile on your face and you're thinking they're going to give you that debit card and, you know, some checks, you sit down and you get that awkward conversation where this banker's like, "I'm sorry, Mr. McCambridge, we can't open up an account for you here," you know, and you have to make that walk out of the bank like, "Man, the bank doesn't even want my money," you know, and good thing the liquor store does. And I would find myself going to the check cashing place. And the check cashing place is great, right? The only downside to the check cashing place is they give you all the money from your check right then and there, you know. And I always envied the restaurant worker, the server, the bartender, because you got paid every night. You know, you were like, yeah, I spent it all last night, but I'll make it back today. I'll work a double. You know, me, I got paid on Fridays. That was it. And I'd get paid, and I'd go to the check cashing place, and by Monday morning, I'd be broke. I'd have no money left, and I would spend the rest of that week just eking by, maybe stealing some money from my dad who I lived with, or stealing money from my brother who lived with me, and just trying to make it to that next Friday, you know. And when I got to AA, I did not understand why I wanted to kill myself. I did not get why I wanted to die. But as I stayed sober and I started to share with people what I just shared with you, that I worked 60 hours a week in the sun, digging holes, cleaning up nasty stuff to get paid on Friday, and then turn around and spend that entire check on alcohol and other stuff in a weekend and be broke on Monday morning. I understood why I wanted to kill myself. Our literature talks about alcohol becoming our master. And at that point, it was very clear to me when I got sober, when I was able to look back with a sponsor, that alcohol had become my master. Because I don't know about you, but if somebody said to me, hey, you're going to work all week, and when you finish working at the end of the week, you're going to give me your check and you're not going to have anything to show for it. Maybe some bruises, maybe an arrest, maybe a loss of a bunch of relationships, and that's all you're going to get out of it. I would have never agreed to something like that. But I did. And I did it over and over and over again, every week. And so I get sober and I tell people I kind of want to die. I feel like dying. I've got nothing to live for. And they would laugh, and they would say, keep coming back. You're in the right place. Didn't make sense at the time, but it does now, but I didn't understand. Why do I want to die? Why do I find myself crying myself to sleep at night? What's going on here? And that's it. I am an alcoholic, but I was living in alcoholism in a really bad way. And I had no solution. By this point in my life, my friends didn't want anything to do with me. Those friends I played sports with, the friends I hung out with, the friends from school, they were all gone. If I was lucky, maybe there was a girl who would hang out with me long enough, but eventually she'd get tired of me too. She'd realize that this guy, the girls I was hanging out with they weren't the greatest either, but even they were like, man, I can find a better loser than this guy, and they would leave, and so here I am, I'm sleeping on this little twin mattress on the floor, I'm going to the bathroom in bottles in my bedroom because I'm so paranoid that I think my father, I'm doing other stuff in the middle of the night in my room, and I'm thinking my father can hear my heartbeat from across the hall. I'm like, shh, quiet, what is going on? I'm looking out the blinds to see if the cops are coming every 10 minutes, and this is my life, and so what ends up happening to me is I end up getting what hopefully will be my last arrest, and I didn't get a DWI this time. I was on foot because they had revoked my driver's license. And I had wrecked my father's car, so we had no vehicle at the house. And I would walk, and on this specific incident, I had a Friday and a Monday off work. And I'll tell you what, man, that's good drinking right there, man. That's a 4-dayer right there. That's like you might die kind of thing for me. And so it was Monday. It was that 4th day, and I found myself going back to the liquor store, and I walk in, and I'm going to re-up my supply, and the people at the counter, they might have saved my life that day. They looked at me, and they'd seen me coming in and out of the store for days, and they just said no. They said, we're not giving it to you, man. And this is about 1 p.m. This is a 7-Eleven, and people are in there getting their hot dogs, they're getting their coffee, and then there's me. And I'm trying to get a couple Mad Dogs, I think at this point, some 16-ounce Budweiser cans, and I start making a scene in the 7-Eleven, calling the people names and screaming and telling them this is America, you'd sell me this beer, and they're like, we don't have to sell you anything. And little did I know, they called the police, and I walked out front, and there was 2 police officers there, and there's one thing I said I was never going to do again, it was hit an armed man. And but again, when you're drunk, you do crazy things, and I swung and hit an armed man again, and I'm lucky. Found myself in jail again. This time I sat in jail for 32 days. Nobody bailed me out. There wasn't anybody left to call. It was just me. And it's a lonely place to be. If you're in this meeting tonight, you probably know that loneliness. You probably know that place where you have just pushed everybody out of your life. Everybody who loves you still loves you, but they can't help you. They don't know what to do anymore. And that's where I was at. And I sat in jail and I thought about every day, what have I done? And I made that resolve that I had made so many times before. I'm done. I'm not going to drink. And this is where, after I got sober and was going over my first step with my sponsor, it was pointed out to me what alcoholism is. Because I thought in that first time I went to treatment that I was an alcoholic because I blacked out. I thought I was an alcoholic because I wet the bed a lot when I was drinking. I thought I was an alcoholic because I had 3 DWIs. I thought I was an alcoholic because I got belligerent when I was drinking. I was that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But what I can tell you, and what was pointed out to me, is those are common symptoms of alcoholics sometimes. I would say everybody in here may have one of those things. You may have all of them, you may have none of them, but those are symptoms we see. But that is not what makes me an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic because of a few things. Two things, actually. This book says that, one, when I drink, I can't control how much I drink. And the second one, which is why I'm here tonight, is that when I stop drinking, I cannot stay stopped. I will always go back to alcohol. Always. No matter how many years I have hanging over my head, no matter how many promises I made to the people I loved, no matter how many of those looks I got from the people who loved me that made me want to die, no matter how bad it got, I would always go back to drinking. And so you see, when I'm sitting in that jail cell, and every day I'm telling myself I'm going to change my life and I can't live like this anymore and I'm done, what I didn't realize is that that alone was not enough. That was never going to be enough. And so I left that jail. 7 days later, I went to my probation officer and she said, "Congratulations, Miss McCambridge, you're going back to jail for violating," because I was always on something, And I left there and I went to a payphone, and payphones back then. I called my mother and I said, "Mom, I'm 39 days sober." And you know it's bad when your mom's like, "That's good for you, son." And I got off the phone with her and I looked over and there was a liquor store and I thought, it's pretty tough right now. Life is tough. And I relate to a guy in the big book. There's a guy named Jim, and he talks about putting some whiskey in his milk and having this feeling like he wasn't being too smart in that moment. And I thought, if I just get a miniature, one of the little bottles that they give out on airplanes, that'll take the edge off. And I walked into that liquor store and I got one of those miniatures and I walked out and I drank it. And if you're an alcoholic like me, once you take that drink, you can't stop. And I went on what I hoped would be my last run. And 6 months after that, I ran into a guy. And this guy was a friend of mine growing up, and he was somebody who 2 years prior, I had called me one day and he said, "Hey man, I just got 2 DWIs in 3 days and I don't know what to do." And I had been in and out of AA, and I said, "I know the place for you." And I said, "Meet me at 8 o'clock. We're going to go to an AA meeting." And I took this guy to an AA meeting. I don't know if anybody else relates this, I was a great promoter of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I wasn't even in Alcoholics Anonymous, And I took this guy to a meeting and I introduced him to some of the people, and then we left that night and I pulled out a fifth of Jack Daniels and I was like, "So what'd you think of the meeting, man?" And he was like, "It was good." And I was like, "You want some of this?" And he was like, "I think I'm gonna give this thing a shot." And I was like, "More for me," And I left. And 2 years later, I run into this guy, and he's dressed up kind of how I'm dressed right now. And he's got a great job. He was a loser. I mean, this guy was a loser. If he was hanging out with me, he was a loser. And he looked good. And I said, "What's up, man?" He said, "Remember that meeting you took me to 2 years ago?" He's like, "I've been going every day since. I've worked the steps. I have a sponsor, and my life has never been better. Thank you so much." And I was like, "That's great. That's great." He's like, "How are you?" And I was like, "I'm doing wonderful, man." And the funny part is I think about that today because, if you stick around AA long enough, you're going to meet some people. You're going to see some people out there who you ran into AA who aren't in AA anymore. And they might not be doing that good. And you could very easily ask them how they're doing, and they could say, "Great," but you could see that they were dying in their eyes, and you could say, "Well, it's good to see you, man. I'll talk to you later." And this guy could have very easily said, "It's great to see you. Glad to hear you're doing well," but he didn't. He didn't. I said, "I'm doing great." And he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, you look like you're dying." I was like, "Whoa. You say that to the man who saved your life. I took you to AA." But you know what? He was returning the favor, because the next thing he said changed the course of my life till this day. He said, Do you want to go with me to an AA meeting tonight?" And for some reason, that willingness was there in that moment. And I said yes. And I went to a meeting that night. And where I'm from, our groups my home group is a very large group, 300 people plus, and so there's a lot of Johns. And they gave me the nickname 24-hour John, because we hand out these chips, and the chip you get when you start out is a 24-hour chip. And I had picked up so many of them over the years that they call me 24-hour John, and so I come back to AA this time, and to this day, people still say, "Hey, you're 24-hour John, right?" And they say, what was different for you? how did you end up getting it? Because I've been coming in and out and I can't seem to get this thing. And what I tell them is I wish there was something I could magically whisper in your ear that would make you get sober. But there's not. The truth is for me is that I had just run out of ideas. It's that simple. I had no other ideas left. I was hopeless. And I think that if you're sitting in here tonight and you're new, if you're feeling hopeless, that's a good place to be. I thought it was bad. I thought that it meant my life was over. But in reality, it meant that my life could start. And I say that because what started to happen for me, something I had never done before, was I started to listen to the suggestions that you all gave. I started to say yes to things that sounded completely insane to me when I first started coming around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Somebody said, you know, you should probably get a sponsor. And I said, okay. And I got one that day. That sponsor said, you should call me every day. And I said, okay. And I call him every day. That sponsor said, you've got nothing going on in your life. You can go to a meeting every day. And I said, okay. And he said, we're going to read out of this book together and we're going to do what it says. And I said, okay. And he said, you're going to get to the meeting early. You're going to stay after. You're going to help set up the chairs. You're going to put away the chairs. And we have a weekend event or a conference. You're going to go. And I said, okay. And I started to do these things that I was completely unwilling to do before. And it wasn't out of any virtue. It wasn't because I had figured out the path towards enlightenment. It was simply because I didn't know what else to do. I had no other great plans left. You know, and when I did, I would share them with the guys in the group and they would all have a good laugh, you know, about the things I was going to do with my life. You know, and they would tell me, show up to the meeting. And I started to work through the steps. And the steps is really where my life has changed and what has given me the spiritual experience we talk about. And I did that fourth step finally, and I was honest with another man. And there was some things on there that I never wanted to tell anybody when I did the fifth step with my sponsor. There was some things that had happened when I was younger. There were some things I'd done out there when I was drinking. There were some pains I had caused others that I just didn't want to tell anybody. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I felt different. And I was 100% sure that when I shared them with this sponsor, he was going to say, ooh, this is AA. We can't help you here, you know? And that's not what happened. He laughed and chuckled and shared some of his own experiences with me. Some of the messed up stuff that I thought nobody would ever want to tell anybody else. And through that, I was able to start feeling a little freer. I was able to feel like, okay, maybe I'm not that different. And there was also this man who I had now told everything about me. So anything else I was going to tell him going forward was not going to be anywhere near as bad as all that stuff. And I was able to start sharing these things with this guy. And through that, my life really started to change. People would call me when I was newly sober and I didn't get it. I worked, so I was, that job I had when I was at the end of my drinking was not a good job for me. The guy I worked with, we drank together every day. We rode around in a van, a work van, and we kept a cooler in between us filled with beer. And I told my sponsor that when I got sober, and he's like, look, I'm not telling you it's a bad job, but it might not be the greatest job for a newly sober alcoholic who likes to drink. And I said, I think you should get a different job. And I said, okay. And I got a job working at Starbucks. And that was that, hey, it paid my rent and it was fine. But I would walk home from work because my license was revoked, and these guys would call me from AA and they would ask me how my day was going and what, how are you doing? And they would get quiet. They would just say, how you doing? And then they'd get quiet. And I hated awkward silences when I was new, and I'd be like, and I would just start telling them everything. I feel like this, I feel like that, and it didn't make any sense to me at the time, but I started following what they were doing. I started calling other guys in the program. And through me calling other people, I started forming relationships. When I got to the meeting early, I started making friends with the other people who were setting up the chairs. When we would go out of town to these conferences or we would put on events, I started making friends with people. And I started having this life. I started spending time with my family again. And I want to talk about a couple of experiences that have been really important to me. And I like to remember them because, I still have a sponsor today. And I still talk to him regularly, and I'm still honest with him, and he still gives me suggestions. And I have a really good life today. And sometimes I can think now more than ever that I know what to do, or I know what's best. But I can tell you that my sponsor has never given me a bad suggestion. He hasn't. And I need to remember that today just as much as I did when I was new. And a couple of things happened. When I had about a year sober, that sponsor gave me 2 suggestions. And the first one was to take a meeting into a treatment center that I had been a patient at 3 times. And he said, he took a meeting in there and he said, there's a night open to take a meeting into this center. There's a lot of guys in there that need help. And he said, I think you should do it. And I was like, I don't know. And it wasn't because I didn't want to, do a meeting that night. It was because I already had another meeting that I liked on Wednesdays. This was a Wednesday night meeting. And I was a part of this group and I felt like I needed to do that. And my sponsor did what one of my favorite things that sponsors do. I said, well, I don't know about that. And he said, all right, fine, do whatever you want. And I was like, that's like sponsor, my favorite sponsor. Sure, no problem, just do whatever you want, man. And that was my cue that I should do this. So I started taking that meeting in there, and I can tell you that I did it for 15 years, and that I've met and sponsored and helped and have some of my closest friends today are men that I met in that treatment center dying of alcoholism. And I've also met other men in there who died, unfortunately, of alcoholism and got to meet and see some examples of what alcoholism is, clear as day. But it has been one of the most powerful things I've done. And it was a simple suggestion from a sponsor that I could have very easily said, I already got something else going on. And the second thing he suggested me to do was to start having dinner with my father once a week. And I mentioned to you, my father, alcoholism, we weren't very close anymore. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it because I didn't like being around my father. I didn't want to be around him. But I said yes. And so I called my father up and I said, hey, you want to start having dinner on a weekly basis? And he said, okay, sure. And I started going by there. And this is how it started. And this is important too, I think, for the newer people, maybe. Maybe some of you aren't as dumb as I am, I don't know. But I would go over there and I'd show up at 6:30. He'd buy the food. He'd cook the food. He'd serve me the food. I'd take a nap on his couch after I ate the food while he did the dishes, and then I would leave. And I almost am embarrassed to say that right now, but that's what I did. And after probably 6 months of that, I called my sponsor up one day and I said, can I tell you what's going on? I have a feeling maybe something's off here. I'm not feeling good about this dinner thing. And I told him, I was like, I'm going over. He's cooking. He's cleaning. I'm eating. I'm napping. And he was like, what? He's like, would you do that anywhere else? What are you doing? And it dawned on me in that moment that I was selfish, self-centered. And my sponsor said, you're going to get the food. You're going to help him make the food. He will not touch a dish. And you will not ever take a nap in those few hours you get to spend with him. And I started following that suggestion, and something changed. This man who I didn't want anything to do with became one of my best friends. And that wasn't anything that I had done. That was just taking this simple suggestion from a sponsor. And going from having dinner once a week, started multiple phone conversations a week with my father. And if anything ever came up that was important in my life, he was the first person I would call. And that's not me. That's not me. And I've gotten to this 8th step and now this 9th step, and I'm making these amends, and that relationship completely changed. And I knew in that moment that there was a God, because I know that I was incapable of creating that on my own. And at 7 years sober, my father had a massive stroke and he passed away. And I tell you that to say that when he died, there wasn't anything between us. I knew he didn't have to worry about me. And I also knew at that time that he didn't have to worry about my little brother anymore, because I had cleared that relationship up as well. I sat down with my little brother, and when I made amends to him, he looked at me and he said, John, I look up to you more than anybody in the world. And this was a guy who, when I got sober, wouldn't take my phone calls. This was a guy I'd punched holes in his door. I'd stolen money from him. He had moved out of the house we lived in because he couldn't stand looking at his brother. I don't know about any of you, but one of the things that kept me up at night when I was out there and when I got sober was that I was a terrible example to my little brother. And I was able to right that relationship. 6 months after my dad dies, my mom gets diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. She's paralyzed, and she can't support herself. She can't take care of herself. This woman was a nurse for 40 years, took care of people her whole life. And here she is, unable to take care of herself. And I get to come in and take care of her. And again, that is not me. That's not something I'm capable of doing on my own. I was able to move from where I lived to where she lived, and my job allowed me to do that, which again, there's no way anybody was giving me an opportunity like that. And I was able to show up. I was able to be with this woman. And for 3.5 years, I was able to help take care of her and be a positive force in her life. And the last year of her life, I was able, because of my job, to buy my own home where I lived, and I was able to move her up, and she was able to live with me. And I can tell you that when she died in the house that I live in today, that there was nothing between us. And I know that she was not worried about me. I know that she had nothing to worry about for my little brother either. And it was all because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think about it, I really think today, and I when I got sober, I just didn't want to go back to jail. I just really wanted that driver's license back. I really wanted that girl, to like me. And what I had been given is so much more. And it's nothing I would have wanted. It's nothing I would have even listed. And it's been because of AA, and it's been because of those experiences and the steps that I've been able to show up for life. And the most important thing today in my life is my relationship with a higher power and my relationships with you all. And, life is life, and sobriety is sobriety, and you hear people say it all the time, just because you get sober, it doesn't mean bad things don't happen. It doesn't mean that life doesn't continue to happen. When I got sober, there was a list of things that if they happened, I was drinking again. Guarantee it. And on that list were, you better believe it was my parents dying like that. 100%. And I didn't have to go back to drinking. I was able to stay sober and show up. And the other thing I'll say is the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't have to go through those experiences with my family alone. I was never alone, in fact. There were people with me every step of the way. And that was not something I had. Alcoholics Anonymous is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And I can tell you this. It took me over 3 hours to get here tonight. And I'm not going to complain about that, but I'm going to tell you that I would not do that if this wasn't the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I wouldn't. Why? And my job today, now that I've been given this amazing life, because the last thing I ever want to be, and I was listening to somebody the other day say this, the last thing I want to be is the guy that got his and who left. I know those guys. I see those guys. Some of them are still my friends, and they don't have that glow, man. They don't have that glow. And I want that glow. And how do I do that? I got to give back to this thing. So my job today in Alcoholics Anonymous is to continue to show up. It's to say yes. It's to answer my phone when I don't want to. It's to offer that guy a ride. It's to take that guy's number and call him and see how he's doing. It's to show up to my home group early, to go to dinner with everybody at the group, to have a good attitude, a smile on my face. Even if I've worked all day, I'm exhausted, and I don't feel like I have anything to contribute, I show up, I say a prayer, and I smile. Because there's some new guy there who's watching. He's watching, And the reality is my life is amazing today because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I owe everything to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep trying to give back to the thing that has given me so much. And I know that if I do that, I'll get to keep staying sober. I'll get to keep being happy, joyous, and free. And I get to be here with you all. So with that, I'll close. Thanks.
Let's thank John again for that epic talk. Thanks, John. And it's customary for us to form a line, thank our speakers, personally, because they come here at their own time and expense, 3 hours each way. You'll be home in bed by the time you're still going to be driving home. And if you've never done that for AA, you don't understand the sacrifices that's done. But out of gratitude, I was always taught it's an action where, I watch my feet, my gratitude. What else we got going on here? First, we got to thank the world's greatest coffee maker, Ed. Where is it at? Take it back. Quick survey. Who wants ketchup on their hot dogs? Bring it next week. I was dying to do that. Sorry. We're not a glum lot. What else we got to cover? Yeah, stay for the meeting after the meeting. Okay? It's important. We like to be all inclusive. This group is. It's not exclusive. It's all inclusive. And stop and talk to somebody if you're suffering and you're not enjoying life or not enjoying sobriety. You know, hopefully we can share some things that we do that changed our lives. Anyway, we got a nice way of closing. If you care to join us, we'll start with a moment of silence and end with the Lord's Prayer. If you care to join us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Keep coming back. Go Birds!